as much potential as Africa, with a population of 1.4 billion people, with the highest resources of energy and natural resources, with the demographic dividend being the youngest continent, a continent that will probably have 25% of the world's workforce in the next 20 years or 25 years, and a continent that will be the largest single market by 2050. With the resources in food production and many other natural resources, it becomes absolutely necessary that stability, peace, and security become a solid cornerstone of the Africa we imagine into the future. And therefore, it is absolutely necessary at this point in time for Africa Union to reimagine, rethink, reorganize our peace and security architecture. As things stand today, Africa is a big theater of conflict and, unfortunately, terrorism. And our response has been uncoordinated, under-resourced, and not very well planned. Therefore, we have recommended that a high-level panel interrogate our peace and security infrastructure, including the envoys across the continent, the infrastructure around the Africa Union Commission, the Peace and Security Fund, and also the effects of Resolution 2917 that now makes it possible for African-led peace efforts to be funded by the United Nations with the resolution of the United Nations Security Council. Because without and unless we deal with the conflicts in our continent, the threats and ravaging effects of terrorism in our continent, it will become almost impossible to undertake any meaningful investment or development or economic activity in our continent. And therefore, matters of peace and security are existential to us as a continent. It is also important that this retreat discussed the subject of financing for the Africa Union. We did undertake that we will finance 100% of the operational budget, 75% of the program budget, and 25% of the peace and security budgets. But that has not been attained. Again, we have provided a framework, and I will be recommending to the summit of the heads of state and government next month on our suggestions on how we can plug the gaps and provide adequate funding and a mechanism for adequately financing the Africa Union. The third issue that we have agreed on is the operationalization of the Africa Court of Justice. As we all know, this is what was envisaged in the Constitutive Act of the Africa Union, and to provide clarity and to exercise judicial authority of the Union. The African Court of Justice and the protocols necessary for its implementation were concluded in 2009, and 16 years later, we have not been able to operationalize. I will therefore be making recommendation for the operationalization of the African Court of Justice with the appointment of judges so that by June this year, we can have a mechanism for conflict resolution in our continent, especially on disputes between countries, disputes between institutions of the African Union, and a reference for the tribunals that currently exist. Once again, it is a very important forum that we have engaged in that will go all the way to a presentation on the Pan-African Parliament to make it much more accountable, to agree on the election process of members of the Pan-African Parliament, to look at the